So thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with Kat and Nathan to have this great conversation. So before we get started, I'm just going to ask my two panelists to introduce themselves. Kat, why don't we start with you?
Hey, everyone. My name is Kat Cantillo. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I am autistic as well as having like learning disabilities like auditory processing disorder. And for that, I identify as neurodivergent. I am the threat ops analyst team lead at Huntress, and I am the DEIB advisor to the board of WESIS neurodiversity affiliate. In my free time, I love to be creative, play video games, and speak on neurodiversity, accessibility, inclusion, and belonging. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Nathan.
Hi, everyone. It's great being here. My name is Nathan Cheung. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm currently a security engineer at Berkshire Hathaway Home State Companies, and I'm a global neurodiversity champion. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so it's great to have both you and Kat here with us. And, there's definitely a reason why you are the chosen panelists for this conversation. Kat, I want to start off with hearing from you about the checklist that you created about, what might be useful for conference event planners to be thinking about in their planning and accessibility provisions. And what inspired you to do this work?
Of course. So I think like about a year ago when the affiliate was just starting to like be put together, Nathan and the affiliate president Cassandra were working on like how to put me into this role, right? How can I be a part of the affiliate? And when they had offered me a DAIB advisor position, I had thought about all the things that I would want to do in that position to, help places in like cybersecurity be more neuro-inclusive. And so it had been really thought about for a while, but then cybersecurity conferences were happening, and I was reading like stories on LinkedIn about, things weren't neuro-inclusive, just like the world's not accessible, right? So not every place is going to be accessible to neurodivergent people and disabled people, chronically ill, etc. And so I thought, what would be great? A checklist, at least a place to start from. You don't have to take everything from it, but at least it gives you an overall list of things that people can do. And from that, I had reached out to Nathan and I said, hey, I have my things that I would want to list on it, just being somebody who has traveled and has been to other places, like what could they add into that? I said, but there are people out there that have actually been to cybersecurity conferences. I have never been to one in person before. So I was like, I would value them having that experience to add that to this checklist to make sure I'm hitting everything I can. So ultimately, it just came about through that.
I love that. And I love your goal of trying to hit everything you can, right? Because it's hard to sort of see the world through everyone's eyes and everyone's experiences. So I love that you're making this a community effort to really understand multiple perspectives. So the idea of making cybersecurity conferences user-friendly for all is definitely something that all of us think about, right? What I love about what you did, Nathan, was that you actually took action to get input from the community. And I have on the slides here some results from a poll that you had administered. Can you share with today's audience a little bit about the survey you conducted and what your goals were?
Sure, absolutely. Because when discussing with Kat, it got me thinking. I was very curious to hear from the committee how they felt about conferences being accessible to people. As you can see from the results, there were three options basically. The results showed 12% people say yes, it was great. 30% showed that it was okay, the basic needs were met. But the big shock was 58% said their conferences do not provide anything.
Mm.
And taking another step further, the even greater shock is the vast majority of that 58% are women who have special needs. This, I was, quite frankly, my jaw was on the floor when I saw those results, because in all these talks, when we talk about barriers that's keeping women out of cybersecurity, this poll, the 50% shows another barrier that, quite frankly, women's needs are not being met at conferences when they have a disability. And we really need to do a better job to make conferences more accessible. It's like not a should do, we must do this.
Right. And so I want to go back here just to give our listeners sort of some context to what maybe folks were thinking about in terms of accessibility and meeting needs when you administered this poll. And maybe, Kat, you could share with us, what are some of the items on that checklist that sort of were universal? You talked about wanting to meet everyone's needs, right? And so I would imagine that some of the items on the checklist may apply to some people, not necessarily needed for all. And so what are some of those universal checklist items that were sort of echoing across your whole communities?
I could share the checklist, but I would think that, like, on the realm of, like, I approach it in a very sensory based focused. So a lot of neurodivergent people have, like, sensory issues, or like they're hypo or hyper sensitive to sensory things. Like, for me, bright lights are a big thing. I will not be able to, like, process my information. So maybe there's, like, a large group of other neurodivergent people that also have that problem. Loud noises, that could be also a thing. So I think that, like, the aspects that I have in the checklist that could be relatable, almost could even be relatable to even people that are not neurodivergent, which I think is the key here, that if you make a conference neuro-inclusive, you're not just helping neurodivergent people, you're helping everybody. So I would say, just like, when you're going to a conference, you want to be able to learn something. That's what you're going there for, right? So you're learning and you're networking. And so for people that are neurodivergent, that might be a little bit easier way of approaching it. But sometimes, you might have a bad day, right? So for example, you just might, the day just not going very well. You don't really feel like talking to somebody. And people that are neurodivergent, sometimes we just don't want to talk, we're not in the mood to talk to people. And there are simple things, like images, or like you could, wear, like, something on you that says, right now I'm not really available for talking. And that communication is just right there on you. You're like, okay, I'll come back at another time. That could help everybody. I don't know if Nathan wants to share something on that, but that's what I have.
Sure, absolutely. Because when going through when asking for input from this poll, I was, quite frankly, shocked by all the various inputs from people, because people are very strongly about how conferences are, like a term, it's like a jungle. It's like navigating a minefield of all these obstacles. Like, when, for example, one lady shared how just going through the, like, a kind of expo area where all the vendors are, it's like they literally get bombarded by people getting in your face saying, come see our product, let me talk to you about trying to sell you this or that. It's great, wonderful, but for a lot of people, like such as myself, who have autism and ADHD, it can be a nightmare. Literally, sensory overload, anxiety from just all that. But from the checklist, what shocked me that people really, really need it is a quiet room where they can chill, relax, and be free of sensory overload. That was one
Absolutely.
of the highlights. Yep.
Yeah. And I myself have, auditory issues. So things that if there are noises or like even like low resonating noises that are consistent, it's an auditory nightmare for me. And I can't focus, I can't think. So I totally understand that. And, you know, as someone who loves an expo floor, but is not at all in a position to be making investment choices for my company, I get so intimidated when I go to, because I want to go and see. I think it's, you know, incredible and it's fun and a little bit over, you know, it's definitely overwhelming, but it's cool to see. I wish I could walk around when no one else is there so I could see, you know, what everyone's booth looks like without having to interact with anyone, because it's overwhelming and uncomfortable, especially for introverts. So I love that you're all, you know, just bringing these topics front of mind for people to be thinking about. And Nathan, I'm just curious if you at all, or in what ways your experience as particularly a cybersecurity professional and the conferences that you've attended has informed the work that you've been doing with CAT.
Yep, absolutely. Because at many cybersecurity conferences, I'm a very vocal about neurodiversity and the benefits of it. Like, for example, like being able to find a needle in a haystack, or being very being a very detailed, detail oriented. These are competitive advantages, which makes people like us very, very, very efficient at working in cybersecurity. But we can only be efficient if our needs are met. And quite frankly, we still live in a world where many people are just afraid to ask for what they need, because there's still a lot of negative stigma of being broken or being labeled as like the next person be shown the door. Because if you see on news, there's so many layoffs going on, and I can imagine this probably drives more people to take a step back, say, "Hey, I'm not ready to be open about this yet."
Yeah, absolutely. Kat, I want to go back to the checklist, and if we can pull that up at any point, that would be great to just have that visual to share with our audience. But I know that the slides will be made available along with the recording. So if we aren't able to see it now, you will have access to it. But when you think about the checklist and then you look at these poll results here, what was most interesting, both in an expected and unexpected way in these findings for you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. When I think about being neurodivergent and thinking about what needs are of me, right? I'm one person and every person is an individual. So I took a look at the findings that Nathan had found. I think he did a poll on LinkedIn about just other additional I forgot the word. The train have left the station. Okay. All right. I will get there. Yes. So he did a like a LinkedIn poll survey to find out like additional things that people could have if they could have it. And there were maybe like 3 or 4 things on that list where I was like, wow, I didn't even know that existed. So I got to learn something new, which I think is a really great thing to think about, is other people putting in their input. It goes to show like you can learn something new about something related to like accommodations or just best practices, as I like to call them. So if I think about more specifically that my words are not doing so well. I do apologize.
No, you're fine.
I think that ultimately it wasn't too surprising in terms of knowing that there is more to be done. I just think that I was it was not too surprising. So ultimately what I'm trying to put together is it wasn't like it was expected to hear that there was other things that could be done at conferences and stuff like that to make it neuro inclusive. But I got to learn based off of what those other additional things were. So I didn't know, for example, I'll just give, I didn't know about the sunflower lanyard for people with like chronic illness and other neurodivergent needs. And so that was something I got to learn more about, which I did my research before I added it to the checklist, because I was like, okay, this is really, really vital. This is important. And so something like that was something that I didn't expect to find in the findings, but got to even learn more for myself and to be able to help other people.
Yeah. And, a few of the things that you had talked about that were elements of the checklist had to do with sensory, sound, sight, smell. But there's also, visual things like printed digital materials, especially, people who are have dyslexic or are colorblind, just sort of thinking about how all of, different brains interpret visual information is important too. So just giving considerations to things like, large print or audio in addition to print, or accessibility of digital files, creating PDFs, things of that language and things of that nature. And then also, because I was thinking ahead, ensuring that systems are able to provide closed caption like we are here, and that events are able to provide sign language interpreters. That was one thing that, I know that we have that available at RSA Conference, but I also saw it at WESIS a couple weeks ago in Denver, and just really appreciate sort of that thoughtfulness of how are we making everyone feel, that they are getting as much as they can out of this experience.
Yeah.
Oh, and I can, if you don't mind, I would like to chime in. One other huge piece, that many people have indicated that they need is gender neutral bathrooms, because for many, especially in the LGBTQ plus community, that is so vital.
Yeah.
Because when I saw that, when that came in loud and clear, I was frankly shocked, because I didn't even think about that.
Right. And
so
that was
vital.
kind of my point earlier with, appreciating Kat's perspective of, wanting to talk to other people, because there are some things that we're not all going to think about, right? Because we all have different experiences. But when we, it's what do we do with that information? Do we say, oh, that doesn't matter because it doesn't apply to me? Or do we say like, oh, no, of course, that's something that's critical to provide that kind of access so that everyone feels welcome and included, right? And, Kat, you had also mentioned the name tags and, the a flag that conveys, I'm not interested in talking right now. And just a quick little anecdote. I used to be a teacher, and I shared an office with several other teachers, and one of them was a particularly chatty fellow, and and sometimes it was quite obvious in my responses to his efforts to talk that I was busy. I was focused on something else and I didn't want to talk. So he made flags for all of our desks with a red, a yellow, and a green flag, so that, when we were open to just chit-chatting, we could put the green flag up. But when we, were working and focusing, we needed the red flag. And if you needed to interrupt me for a second to ask a quick question, we'd put the yellow flag up. So, so I thought that was, interesting to add to the conversation. Just, it doesn't necessarily need to be an event. It can be among our coworkers, right? That these sorts of just acknowledgements and awareness of other people are important to see too.
Absolutely. And I'm happy you brought that up, Kacy, because I think another very critical piece of conferences is being able to go hybrid route, because despite COVID going away in some places of the world, what makes it difficult, especially for many women, a lot of women still have various other health conditions. Like, for example, I know many women have poor immune systems. many of them cannot physically go to a conference because they are very much worried about their health. I think conferences do very much need to do a better job of having a hybrid option so that a speaker, even though they're at their home and you can't attend the conference, they can still present their ideas, because many women throughout the world, they need to be heard. They need to have a platform for their ideas to get out there.
Yeah. And Nathan, that brings me to my next question is, I love the checklist, and I'm trying to, without being able to share the visual, trying to bring up as many points that are listed on here as possible. Sensory friendly sound levels, sensory quiet rooms, clear signage, getting comfortable with people before the event. I love how you have it outlined here, Kat, that there are things that you can do before the event, things that you can do during the event, things that you can do after the event, accessible toilets, gender neutral single bathroom stalls, accessible transportation from the airport to the event, discounted companion tickets, scooters or wheelchairs, service animal toileting. There are lots of things that, are valid things to think about. So I guess, what do we do with this now? What are your hopes for the impact that this checklist will have? And I'd love to hear from both of you. Nathan, why don't we start with you?
Sure. It is our hope that now that we have a checklist with a lot of committee input, our hope and goals are essentially to help drive change. We have to drive the change to help make all cybersecurity conferences accessible. Like, I understand this isn't going to happen overnight, and a lot of organizations will struggle to even adapt some or most of the changes. But like we got to take baby steps. At least start with the basics, like closed captioning and transcription services, and the signage. Like, just get started, and in my view, that will open the door wider for more women to go to cybersecurity conferences, and it'll help to address the cybersecurity gender gap.
Love that. It's an ambitious goal, but I like the reality of the baby steps. Kat.
So the hopes that the impact would have. I know that the check looks like it's long and there's a lot. It's of course not exhaustive. There's probably numerous other things that could be added to the checklist. But I think that ultimately that I hope that people who are in businesses or organizations that are doing offsites and conferences and events, that you can look at your mission, look at what your focus are, what your best practices are, and kind of revamp it. You don't have to change everything, you don't have to start all over, but add those focuses in. You can pick a couple of things. You can look at what might even be the most affordable for you, since I know that cost is something that's really important to look at. So look at the most affordable aspects, maybe even free, and start with that. Add that to what you do day in and day out, because if it's included into everything that you do, then it's not a second thought. It's not an additional task that you have to complete. That's definitely a hope that I have, that people will kind of make it a best practice. It's not like if I were to go to a conference, I'd have to request accommodations. I would love for it to just be something that is already there. I hope that people realize that it really isn't that hard and that expensive. I know there's a couple different areas that might be a little bit more tricky, but we're a community, a cybersecurity community. There are so many people here that are willing to help out, both in cybersecurity and just neurodivergent people, to help make this happen. Reach out, figure out what you can do to make sure that other people feel, or everybody feels included, especially our focus on neurodivergent folks. And I just hope that also my hopes will also go to neurodivergent people. I hope that in the future that there will be more conferences that you go to, that you won't have to be like, oh my gosh, like I wish they had this, that, and the third, or I didn't get anything. I just spent like $400, $500 at this conference. I didn't grasp anything because there was no closed captions or any of that. Or I got lost at the place where the conference was because there wasn't clear signage or agendas. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I know that personally, that being able to go someplace and bring your whole self, I hope that for all the neurodivergent people out there that are listening and other people that are in the cybersecurity community, that you can go to these conferences and feel included and feel like you belong, not that you're an extra thought or like a burden or something like that. So my hopes go for both businesses and for neurodivergent people.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you both. Nathan, I know that offline, you and I have spoken about your experience last year at you were a speaker at a conference for the first time, and congratulations, that's super exciting. But knowing that it can feel very overwhelming, the conference actually offered you, I think you said, a lot of resources to help you prepare. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that experience and the impact that had on you?
Absolutely. For starters, that was my very, very first in-person talk. So as you can imagine, for a for a person like me with autism and ADHD, it was very challenging. It was quite frankly terrifying. Like for example, for challenges, like when you're speaking at a media conference, you're literally in a spotlight. You're being blinded from all the light. Next, you have all the crowds. So I got a lot of anxiety just seeing a crowd of people staring at you. So that gave me a lot of anxiety, and most importantly of all, like I was terrified just from the timing. Like many people like me, we have a tendency to ramble on, and it's like time is just something we don't think about. But I was fortunate. Like the conference organizers, were very accommodating. So this was at a Uniting Women in Cyber event in Virginia last year, and the conference organizers were very accommodating to me. Like for example, they helped me to check out the setup, how the chairs were arranged, the stage, and they took me on a little walking tour. Like this is how you walk, and this is the path from where you're sitting to the stage. That really helped. Also, when I told them about the lighting, they helped tone it down a bit. That really helped too. But like next time around, I'll probably wear sunglasses. But yeah, walking the path, seeing the setup, that helped. And most importantly, they showed me that at the bottom of the stage, there's a little timer. That's how you can track time. All that took the edge off, and I was able to relax and enjoy the event a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. Those are definitely important because it is overwhelming to get up there. You know, you can
Yes.
prepare mentally for it as much as you can, but then when you actually get up on the stage for the first time, it's like, oh, wow. And, you know, let's be honest, many attendees at sessions at conferences will take the back seat. And, you know, if it's a large room, it feels even more overwhelming because there's so much space between you and the audience. So I love that, you know, there's efforts going on that help to make speakers feel more comfortable. And I want to be cognizant of time here, recognizing that we do have a couple questions in the queue. I'll throw out one last question for Kat. You had talked about a positive experience that you had. You said that you travel a lot. Can you share some of the ways that either TSA or airlines have assisted you with accessibility?
Definitely. I know that there's a program called TSA Cares. It is a free program that the TSA, the airlines, at least I know in the United States, I'm not sure about any other countries. And so, as we all know, probably, I believe airports are terrifying and super overwhelming. And if you need that extra, you know, support or guidance, I know that even if I'm with somebody and I check in, I have that fear of going through the line where you have to take off your shoes and take off your jacket. They actually go with you through that whole thing.
Mhm.
They could even have someone come and meet you at the, like, where you get dropped off, before you even go inside, if you needed that extra help. But for me, it was just, we checked in. I said, I called about or emailed about the TSA cares. I don't like calling people on the phone, so I only email. And somebody came and met me. It took us right through, my wife and I took us right through the whole entire setup. It was so less anxiety provoking for me that by the time we got to the end, they walked us to our seats and then just said, like, okay, we'll leave you here. And then they interacted with the person at the ticket desk, and then was able to help us on with ease, got on early, about 10-15 minutes early before everybody else, was able to get into the seat, sit down, relax before the whole crowds came through. So I didn't feel any judgment or any, like, I wasn't being discriminated against. It was just really caring people who just wanted to help out. So if you ever travel, highly suggest TSA Cares.
Yeah, and Kat, I really have to thank you for mentioning that in the conversations that we've had prior to this, because my 81-year-old mother-in-law was flying alone from Boston to DC, and she's not easy on her feet as she's getting older and hard of hearing. And you had mentioned TSA Cares. She was terrified of flying alone. And I called TSA Cares, and she got to DC and she called me and she said, that was incredible. And I have no fear of ever flying alone again. It was fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing that experience
Of
with
course.
me and now with our attendees. And I do want to get a couple questions from the audience. And, I know we've talked about some of the checklist items. Some Adam is bringing his crocodile to conference, his emotional support crocodile to conference, because it helps to reduce with social engagement. So kudos to you. That's wonderful. And we have a question about some of us are parents of neurodiverse children, and that is challenging to take time away from conferences. How do we improve that?
Real quick, I can chime in real quick.
Yeah.
This is why the conferences, they need to be accessible. Like, for example, like for many people, they not just parents, some people they have health concerns, or they are taking care of a sick parent, for example, or they just cannot find time to get on the plane. So being able to attend and or present at a conference virtually is very critical.
Yeah, I agree, Nathan, because, the cost of travel and the resources that it takes to be able to make sure that your family is taken care of in your absence can be overwhelming. And there's definitely something to that experience of being able to learn in person and do that networking together. But, we have the RSAC 365 digital cybersecurity learning program that offers year-round education for that very reason, right? Because it's not just one day that we all come together and learn, or 1 week that we all come together and learn. The opportunities abound, and we see this kind of education available all over the industry, which is wonderful. I think, in light of the pandemic, there's been an explosion of digital, virtual, hybrid content, as we're doing now, that really reaches a broader audience and makes the content accessible to a wider group of people. So I appreciate that point very much. We talked about cost can be sometimes overwhelming. Does anyone have advice for support for women who are seeking an ASD diagnosis for accommodations? I notice more males are diagnosed, and my family member has tried to get a diagnosis, but fewer minorities that I know have been diagnosed.
I know that we often talk to a lot of people in WeZest Neurodiversity affiliate about seeking a diagnosis. So not to put that out there or anything, but definitely check us out. We can, have that conversation, and you can talk to other people who are also looking for or seeking a diagnosis, because I know it's a long process and sometimes it's almost like unbearable to get through. So just know that self-diagnosis is still validating. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Also,
Yeah,
to add,
Nathan, thank you so much. This
Yep.
has been such a great conversation. I really appreciate you all asking me to join, and
Yep.
everyone being here today. Nathan, I'm sorry to cut you off, but
no worries.
respectfully, we have to stick to the
Yep.
schedule here. So I'm going to
Okay,
turn it
no
back
problem.
over to Stephanie.
Yep, thank you.